Seek me, find me. Seek me, find me. Seek me, find me. Come to me, come to me. Seek me, find me. Seek me, find me. Seek me, find me. Come to me, come to me. In stone is ringing iron from iron, a hammered cage. In that cage is kept a bird. In bird there beats a heart, in heart a hidden light. From that light a song is heard. Iron speaks from stone. Find the one I do not know. Cage speaks from tree. Bring the one who holds the key. Heart speaks in bird. Come to me and tread the cold hidden road. Light leads the way that whispers through the night and day. Seek me, find me. Seek me, find me. Seek me, find me. Come to me, come to me. Seek me, cold I'm, cold bird, dark road. Seek me, find me. Come to me, come to me. Once upon a time, there was a prince, a fine prince, a rich prince, and this prince had everything that he could possibly wish for. He had the finest clothes to wear, he had the finest food to eat, he had the sweetest wine to drink. This prince had no one to serve but himself, and all the long day to do it. And so one day this prince saddled up his horse, climbed on the back, and he went riding. And there he was, riding and riding and riding and riding, the great iron hooves stamping, the horse steaming beneath him. He rode and rode with the wind flat in his face and long in his hair. He rode and rode the length and the breadth of the day, nowhere in particular. Until finally, as the sun went down, this prince found himself at the edge of the land, beside the whispering sea where the waves broke with a roar and a hush. Well, by now the moon had risen and was glinting on the waves of the ocean, when suddenly the prince saw something flashing and glinting in the moonlight beneath him, and he looked and saw there, down on the ground, down in the sand, he saw a little iron ring. Well, he swung down off his saddle and scooped it up in his hand, took it out and blew the grains of sand from it. It wasn't gold and it didn't glitter. It wasn't jeweled and it didn't shimmer. It was a plain iron ring, and yet to the prince he'd never seen anything so simple and so perfect. And he couldn't help wondering, where did it come from? Who did it belong to? And how did it come about to be here? Well, the prince, he put it into his pocket and he turned and rode all the way back to the palace. And when he got back to the palace, he told everyone of what had happened that day, of his long ride with the wind flat in his face and long in his hair. He told them about the moonlight on the water, and then he mentioned the ring. Well, when he said that, all the eligible young women came around him then. Oh, a ring, they said. Oh, well, perhaps we've lost a ring. Perhaps it's one of ours. Show us the ring. Oh, yes, please do. All eyes and smiles and giggles. So the prince reached in and took out the iron ring. And when they looked at it, they turned up their noses and laughed. They said, "What, that? It's nothing but a worthless trinket," said one. "Oh, whoever owns that," said a second, "they must be very poor indeed. And if that was mine," said a third, "I'd have thrown it away myself." But that night, the prince went to his room and sat on his bed with the little iron ring in his hand. He looked at it and thought, well, perhaps they're right. Perhaps this ring is nothing and I'm a fool. So he put it down on the side of the bed, and then he undressed and he slipped in between the sheets. He blew out the candle, and then he turned and lay his head to sleep. But suddenly he heard a noise. It was a knocking noise, a little clattering noise, and it was coming from close by. So in the darkness he fumbled for the matches and struck a light and lit the candle. But it stopped. So he blew out the candle again and turned and lay his head to sleep. But there it was again. The same noise. Little knocking noise. So he reached for the matches again, struck a light, lit the candle. But it stopped. I am a fool, he thought. I'm hearing things now. So again he blew out the candle. And he turned and lay his head to sleep. But there it was again. So quickly he fumbled for the matches, struck a light, lit the candle, and by the glowing golden flame of the candle, he saw it was the little ring. The ring was jumping and clattering and knocking on the table. So he reached out his hand to stop it, but it jumped from the table onto the floor and then rolled underneath the bed. So he jumped out of the bed and he squeezed underneath the frame to get it, but then it just rolled out onto the floor again. So he chased it, and then it rolled around the room, and then suddenly it was up onto the curtain rail, and then from the curtain rail onto the wardrobe, from the wardrobe to the chest of drawers back onto the floor, and then round and round and round in circles went the little iron ring, with the prince running this way and that way trying to catch it. Round and round and round the room it went, and then it was out the door and down the corridor, and the prince running down his bare feet after it. He chased it as it bounced down the stairs. He followed it as it rolled into the hall. And the ring went over the tables and under the tables and under the benches and over the benches, this way and that way, and the prince was running and running and running, and then he saw it roll into the corner, and he saw his chance, and he sprang through the air and caught it. Caught it in his palm. But as he was walking back up the stairs, he could feel the little ring still pulsing and throbbing in his hand. And so that it wouldn't run away, he slipped a silver chain through the middle and hung it around his neck and tucked it beneath his light night shirt. And then the prince lay back in bed and lay his head down to sleep. But all through the long night, that little iron ring jerked and pulled and tugged on the end of the silver chain. Next morning, when the sun rose, the prince got up from a long night without a wink of sleep, kept awake all night by the little tugging ring. And he dressed himself. He thought to himself, I must find out who owns this ring. I will search the kingdom wide, and I will not stop until I find out who this ring belongs to. So he ran from the palace across the courtyard, ran to the stables, saddled up his horse, threw the saddle on the back and belted on the girth, and then he was up into the harness, and he took the reins in his hand. But which way to go? There were 3 roads that led from the palace, one to the east, one to the west, and one to the north. Which one should I take, he thought? And how would I possibly know? Well, he decided, if I'm going to ride one, I'm going to ride them all. So it doesn't matter which way I start, so I'll set off to the east. So the prince set off on the road to the east, and he rode and rode and rode and rode and rode, and then he stopped. Whoa. Now, hold on, this is not the right road. This was not the right road to start. I should have taken the road to the west. Anyone worth their salt will go to the west first. So back to the palace he went, and then he set off on the road to the west. And he rode and rode and rode and rode and rode, and then he's like, whoa, hold on. This is not right. Anyone who's worth their salt should have taken the northern road first. That was the way I should have gone. So he went back to the palace. But as he turned his horse to face the north, suddenly the little iron ring pulled and tugged and jerked on the end of the chain. And as if he was standing in a great river, he felt the road pulling and tugging beneath him, and suddenly his ears were filled with whispers, like the wind through a forest, a whole forest of voices, all singing, "Seek me, find me, seek me, find me, come to me, come to me, seek me." And so the prince, with a little iron ring tugging on the end of the chain, turned his horse and set off on the whispering road to the north. Well, let me tell you, he rode and rode and rode the length and the breadth of the day, with a great horse stamping and steaming beneath him, with the wind flat in his face and long in his hair. He rode and rode for a long time, he rode for a longer time, until at the end of the day, as the sun went down, he came to a huge castle. Well, he was eager to find shelter for the night, so he went round the back and saw that his horse had hay and straw in the stables. And then he went round to the front of the castle, and up the stone steps he went, came to the great door, lifted the iron knocker, and brought it down with a slam. The door opened, and there was a beautiful woman. And she said, "Good evening." And he said, "Good evening. Forgive the lateness of the hour. I'm a traveller, you see, and I seek refuge for the night." She said, "Well, all business can wait till the morning. You're welcome. Come in, come in." And the prince was led in. And a servant lit a candle and beckoned him and led him up the stairs onto a corridor. They walked down the corridor till they came to a door. The servant opened the door and led the prince into a beautiful room with a great soft bed, a room all painted red. And in he went. And he thanked the servant, took the candle, shut the door, put the candle on the bedside, took off his clothes, slipped into bed, and because he had ridden so hard, as soon as his head touched the pillow, the prince fell fast asleep. He must have slept because he woke. And he woke when he heard a strange song coming from somewhere in the castle. He sat up. And quickly he dressed himself. He opened the door. It was coming from down the corridor. So the prince crept down the corridor in his bare feet, down the cold stairs, into the great hall. He followed the strange song until he came into the kitchens where all the cooks were sleeping, all the servants sleeping on the ground. So he stepped over them, careful not to wake them, until he came to a great door, an oak door. The song was coming from the other side. So he turned the iron key, he lifted the latch, and he pushed open the door. And the prince went out into the moonlight. And there in the moonlight, on a little green hill, there was an otter. But the otter was chained with bands of iron. And the little otter sitting on the hill with the chains in the moonlight, it was the otter that was singing.
När trollmor har lagt sin 11 små trollen och bundit dem fast i svansen, då sjunger hon sakta för 11 små trollen de vackraste ord hon känner.
And the prince said, "Otter, are you in trouble?" And the otter said, "If it seems to you that I am in trouble, 10 times worse is the trouble that you are in. But if you promise to set me free, then I will tell you all." Well, the prince agreed. The otter said, "Then listen to my words and heed them well. The beautiful woman that welcomed you here, the owner of this castle, she's nothing more than a troll. And more than anything, she wants the iron ring that hangs around your neck. But prince, for the sake of the one you have yet to meet, do not give it to her." Well, the prince agreed. And then he loosened the chains, and the otter hopped down off the hill. But before it left, it turned its whiskered head and said, "If ever you need my help, then just call, and I will come." And with that, the otter hopped off into the folds of the night and was gone. The next morning, when the prince was dressed and coming downstairs to leave, who should be standing beside the door but the beautiful woman? She said, "Now, what business brings you by my door so late in the day?" And the prince said, "Well, I seek the owner of a ring." "A ring?" she said. "Oh, how lovely. Why don't you show me this ring?" So he reached into his shirt and he took out the little iron ring hanging on the edge of the chain. And the woman looked. She said, "That? Oh, you seek the owner of that, but there's nothing but a worthless trinket." "I tell you what, why don't you leave it here with me?" "No," said the prince. "I think I'll keep it." "No, I think you should leave it." "No, I think I'll keep it." "No, you should leave it." "I'll keep it." "Leave it here." "I'll keep it." "Leave it here." "I'll keep it." "Leave it here." "I'll keep it." "Leave it with me." And suddenly her shoes split open and huge great hairy troll's toes stuck out to the end. And the prince realized every word the otter had said was the truth. She was nothing more than a troll. And he thanked her for her hospitality, down the stairs, up onto the horse, and the prince rode free. So through the length and the breadth of the day, the prince rode and rode and rode, with a little iron ring pulling and tugging on the end of the chain, with the road whispering and tugging beneath him. He rode for a long time, he rode for a longer time, with the wind flat in his face and long in his hair, until as the sun went down, he came to a castle. It was bigger than the first castle. And he was eager to find shelter for the night, so he ran down the back of the castle, went to the stables to see that his horse had hay and straw, and then he was round the front of the castle and walking up the long stone stairs until he came to the door, and he lifted up the iron knocker, and he brought it down with a slam. Well, the door opened, and there was a beautiful woman, far more lovely than the first. And she said, "Good evening." And he said, "Good evening. Forgive the lateness of the hour. I'm a traveler, and I seek a place to rest for the night." And she said, "All business can wait till the morning. You're welcome here. Come in, come in." And so the prince was led inside, and a servant lit a candle and led him up the stairs and along the corridor to a beautiful room, a beautiful bedroom, all painted blue. It was a beautiful blue room. It was a lovely blue room. And he went inside to that lovely room, and he slipped off his clothes, and he climbed into the bed. And because he was tired, as soon as his head hit the pillow, the prince fell fast asleep. must have slept because he woke to hear the song coming from somewhere in the castle. So he dressed himself, he went down the corridor. He went down the cold stone stairs. He went through the great hall until he came to the kitchens, where all the servants and the cooks were sleeping soundly on the floor. He stepped over them until he came to a great door. The song was coming from the other side. So he turned the iron lock, lifted the latch, and shoved it open, and went out into the moonlight. And there, on a hill, on a little green hill, there was a raven. But the raven was chained with bands of iron. But it was the raven that was singing.
När trollmor har lagt sin 11 små trollen och bundit dem fast i svansen, då sjunger hon sakta för 11 små trollen de vackraste ord hon känner.
And the prince said, "Raven, are you in trouble?" And the raven said, "If it seems to you that I am in trouble, 10 times worse is the trouble that you are in. But if you promise to set me free, I will tell you all." Well, the prince agreed. And the raven said, "Then listen to my words and heed them well. The beautiful woman that welcomed you here, the beautiful woman that owns this castle, she's nothing more than a troll. And more than anything, she wants the iron ring that hangs around your neck. But prince, for the sake of the one you have yet to meet, do not give it to her." And so the prince loosened the chains, and the raven flew up into the air. But then it turned its head and said, "If ever you need my help, just call and I will come." And the raven flapped its wings and flew off into the folds of the night and was gone. The next morning, as the prince came down the stairs to leave, who should be standing beside the door but the beautiful woman? And she said, "Now, tell me, what business brings you by my door so late in the day?" And the prince said, "Well, I seek the owner of a ring." "A ring?" she says. "Well, perhaps I myself have lost a ring. Why don't you show it to me?" So he took the ring from the end of the chain so she could see it and held it up. But she looked, she said, "That? You seek the owner of that? It's nothing but a worthless trinket." "I tell you what, why don't you leave it here with me?" No, said the prince. "I think I'll keep it." "No, I think you should leave it." "No, I'll keep it." "Leave it here. I'll keep it. Leave it here. I'll keep it. Leave it here. I'll keep it. Leave it with me." And suddenly her ears sprang up into huge, great, hairy troll's ears. And the prince realized every word the raven had said was the truth. And he thanked her for her hospitality, down the stairs, up onto his horse, and the prince rode free. Well, as for the first day, so for the second and the third. The prince rode and rode and rode and rode with the iron ring tugging on the end of the chain. He rode for a long time, he rode for a longer time, with the wind flat in his face and long in his hair, until as the sun went down, he came to a castle. It was bigger than the first castle. It was bigger than the second castle. It was the biggest castle he'd ever seen. And he went round the back to the stables to see that his horse had hay and straw for the night. And round the front he went, and up the long stone stairs he walked, until he came to the big door, and he lifted up the iron knocker and brought it down with a slam. The door opened, and let me tell you, there was a beautiful woman. She was far more lovely than the first. She was far more lovely than the second. She was the loveliest woman of all. She had curves where he'd never seen curves before. She had curves on curves that he'd never seen before. And she said, "Good evening." And he said, "Good evening. I'm a traveller, and I seek a place to rest my head for the night." She said, "All business can wait till the morning. You're welcome. Come in, come in." And in he went. And a servant lit a candle and led him up the stairs, along the corridor, and led into a room, a beautiful room, all painted gold, beautiful golden room. And he went inside, and he shut the door and thanked the servant. And then he took off his clothes, climbed in between the sheets, and as soon as his head hit the pillow, the prince fell fast asleep.
Oh, Oh, I, boof, boof, oh, I, boof. Oh,
But he woke again when he heard the song, that strange song coming from somewhere in the castle. He dressed himself, he went down the corridor, down the cold stone stairs into the great hall. The length of the hall he walked to the kitchens where all the cooks slept. He stepped over them till he came to the door. He turned the iron lock, lifted the latch, pushed it open and went out into the moonlight. And there, in the moonlight, there was a little green hill. And on that hill, there was a wolf chained with bands of iron. But it was the wolf that was singing.
När trollmor har lagt sina 11 små trollen och bundit dem fast i svans, då sjunger hon sakta för 11 små trollen de vackraste ord hon känner.
Wolf, are you in trouble? And the wolf said, if it seems to you that I am in trouble, 10 times worse is the trouble that you are in. But if you set me free, promise to set me free, then I will tell you all. Well, the prince agreed. And the wolf said, then listen to my words and heed them well. The beautiful woman that welcomed you here, the owner of this castle with her curves and her curves and her curves on curves, she's nothing more than a troll. And more than anything, she wants the iron ring that hangs about your neck. But for the sake of the one you have yet to meet, do not give it to her. Well, the prince then loosened the chains, and the wolf hopped down off the hill, but before it went, it turned its head and said, if ever you need my help, then just call, and I will come. And with that, the wolf loped off into the folds of the night and was gone. The next morning, when the prince came down the stairs to leave, who should be standing beside the door but the beautiful woman? She said, good morning. I trust you slept well. He said, I did. Now tell me, what business brings you by my door so late in the day? He said, well, I seek the owner of a ring. A ring? She said, well, perhaps I've lost a ring. Why don't you show me this ring? So he took out the ring on the end of the chain so she could see. And she looked. She said, you seek the owner of that? It's nothing but a worthless trinket. A fine man such as yourself has no business with that. I tell you what, why don't you leave it here with me? No, said the prince, I think I'll keep it. No, I think you should leave it. No, I'll keep it. Leave it here. I'll keep it. Leave it here. I'll keep it. Leave it here. I'll keep it. Leave it with me. And suddenly her shoes split open and a hairy troll's ears stuck up. And the prince realized that every word the wolf had said was the truth, and he thanked her for her hospitality, down the stairs, up onto his horse, and the prince rode free. But soon he slowed his pace. For 3 days he had ridden hard with hope in his heart that he'd find the owner of the ring, but after 3 days, what had he got to show for it? Nothing but trolls. When he held up that ring now, it just hung heavy on the end. The road no longer pulled beneath him, and when he strained, he could no longer hear the whispers singing to him. And now for the prince, hope was fast slipping away. But he could hear something. It was the sound of running water. And he looked and saw, up in the folds of the field, on the fell side, there was a mountain spring. Water gushing from a hole in the ground beside a tall linden tree with green leaves. Well, the prince was thirsty, so he rode from the path up towards the spring. As he got close, he saw beside the water there was a girl dressed in rags with bare feet. And she was picking up buckets of water to fill at the spring head until they splashed to the brim. Well, as he drew close, she saw him and she was scared. He said, "Please, sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, to startle you. It's just I'm thirsty. Would you mind if I got down and drank from the spring?" Well, at first, the girl looked nervously over her shoulders and then stepped back to allow him. So the prince got down off his horse and he hunched on his heels at the water's side and he leaned forward to scoop the water, but he'd ridden hard for so many days, his hands were blistered and sore. And so every time he tried to cup the water, it just ran from his fingers. Again and again and again he tried, but the water just ran and his thirst just grew. And the girl said, "Here, let me help you." And so she knelt down at the water and she dipped her hands beneath the surface and cupped them up. "Quick, drink," she said. And as she raised her hands, it seemed to the prince that her hands were filled with liquid light. And so he took her hands and put his lips to the water and he drank the cold water. He drank and slaked his thirst. He drank until it ran from his chin and down over his shirt. And then she started to laugh, and she laughed like a bell. And he said, "Here, let me try again for you." And as he leaned forward to scoop the water, the little iron ring fell out on the end of the chain, swinging where she could see it. She said, "Where did you get that ring?" He said, "What, this? Oh, I found it. I'm looking for the owner of it. Do you know this ring? Perhaps you know the owner." She said, "I know the owner. The ring is mine. It was given to me by my mother a long time ago. And she told me whenever I was at my deepest trouble, then I should take that ring and throw it into the river and speak what I most needed in all of the world, and perhaps my prayer would be answered." And the prince said, "But I found this ring at the edge of the sea, washed up by the waves. And as soon as I saw it, I knew there was something strange about it. And so I've ridden hard to find the owner, and now I've found you. So tell me, what is it that you need most in all of the world?" And the girl said, "My freedom, because I am like a bird in a cage. I am a prisoner." And then she went and sat at the roots of the linden tree, and the prince sat down beside her. And the girl in rags told him her story. A maiden watched from her father's hall, dewdrift frost fall, when she spied a fine duke come riding to the door. And the little bird sings so rarely, he slew her parents in their bed, dewdrift frost fall. Then he stole away the maiden to be wed. And the little bird sings so rarely, he locked her up in his castle tower, dewdrift frost fall. And she watched all the green fields fade from flower. And the little bird sings, and the little bird sings, and the little bird sings so rarely. And all the day she wept and sang, dewdrift frost fall, as she plaited up her golden hair wide and strong. And the little bird sings so rarely, she cut the plait with a knife so sharp, dewdrift frost fall, and she hid it away as a fine twist of rope. And the little bird sings so rarely, she tied it tightly to the door, dewdrift frost must fall. And she climbed right over the high castle wall. And the little bird sings, and the little bird sings, and the little bird sings so rarely. And away she went, and away she ran, Dewdrift Frost fall. All beneath the trees and the bright silver moon. And the little bird sings so rarely. She lay her head out on the fell, Dewdrift Frost fall, and awoke to the hands of the mountain troll. And the little bird sings so rarely. And now she weeps and now she sings, Dewdrift Frost fall, of the livelong day and what the night must bring. And the little bird sings, and the little bird sings, and the little bird sings so rarely. And as she told her story, tears ran from her eyes. And the prince said, "Then how can you be free? Perhaps the troll can be killed and I will set you free." The girl shook her head. She said, "The troll has no heart, and that which has no heart can never die." And just then a leaf withered on the branch and fell, fluttering down between them. And then another one fell, and another, and another. And all the leaves on the linden tree were turning from green to brown and falling, as if winter were fast approaching. The girl went white. "The troll, he's coming back. Quick, I must hide you." And she grabbed the prince by the arm and dragged him from the spring. And they ran and ran up the mountainside. They ran and ran until the prince could see a great castle in the distance. And then the girl stopped. "Oh no," she said, "I forgot the buckets of water. He'll be angry if I forget them. I must go back." So she ran all the way back down to the spring, grabbed the buckets by the handles and turned and careful not to spill a drop, fearing the troll's anger. She ran and ran back up the hillside, and the prince ran with her. They ran and ran until they came to the castle. She ran in through the great doors. She put the buckets of water down. She went to the kitchens and opened up a cupboard beneath the sink. She said, "Quick, hide in here and don't say anything." And she shoved the prince inside. But before she could shut the door, he called out. He said, "Listen to me. I have ridden hard for many days now. I carry hope in my heart. All living things have a heart. This much I know. Find out where the troll keeps his." And then she slammed the door shut just in time, because the ground began to shake then. The walls began to quiver and quake. The whole of the mountainside rumbled and shook as the troll came lumbering up the hillside. I bend with death across my back. Flowers fade about me, and brightness dims, and love is lost. My aching eye sees only black.
Jag vacklar under dödens
Only black.
och vissna kring mig. Och ljusets slockna kärlek mista min ömma
and love is lost. My aching eye sees only black. I bend with death across my back. Flowers fade about me, and brightness dims, and love is lost. My aching eye sees only black. Up the hillside he came, whining like a wolf, panting like a bear, slavering and slobbering like a great fat toad. Up the stone stairs he came, and with his huge hairy nose pushed open the door.
Fårkött är gott. Nötkött är bättre. Men människokött är vad jag gillar bäst.
Mutton is good. Beef is better. But human flesh is what I love best. Little girl, is there a human in here? Because I can smell him, you know. A human in here? No, she said. Oh, a magpie dropped the bone down the chimney. Perhaps that's what you smell. And you must feed me, because I'm hungry. And he heaved himself onto the chair with his belly bulging over his belt. And she'd prepared a huge barrel of meat for him, and she shoved it to him, and he reached down and picked up the barrel, and he pulled out the chunks of meat, and he slavered, and he chewed, and he sucked on the meat, and he snapped the bones and sucked the marrow from the middle, and then tipped the barrel back to drink until the grease ran from his chin. Now, you must soothe my head because my brow is aching. And then he lay his head on the table with a thud. And the girl, she clambered up onto the table beside him. And she ran her fingers through his long, greasy hair. But as she stroked his hair, she began to weep. And the troll said, "Little girl, why are you weeping?" Well, she said, "Because I think it's so sad." What is so sad? Well, I think it's sad that such a magnificent troll like you should have no heart. I think that's so sad, and that is why I weep. And the troll laughed. You stupid girl. All living things have a heart. I just don't keep mine here. I keep it hidden. Where do you keep it? Why do you want to know? Well, because wherever it is a special place, she said, and I'm going to lay flowers there every day. Well, all right, I'll tell you. I keep my heart hidden in a box, buried in the earth, safe in the ground beneath the doorstep stone of this castle where the world will never find it and no one will hurt it. Now, sing and dance for me till I fall asleep. And the girl, she sang like a bird and danced like a flame until the troll fell fast asleep. Oh, I, boof. Oh, I, boof. Oh, I, boof, boof. Oh, I, boof. The next morning, when the troll was gone, the girl went to the cupboard and opened it and took out the prince and told him every word that the troll had said. Then quick, he said, "We have not a moment to lose." And they ran to the doorstep, and each of them jammed their fingers beneath the great flagstone, and they heaved and pulled and pushed it back with a slam. And then with nothing but their bare hands, they began to scrape and scuffle at the earth, and scratching at the soil, they dug and dug, piling up the great clods of soil, and they dug and dug deeper and deeper and deeper. They dug until the sweat ran from their brows. They dug through the length and the breadth of the day, but they found no box, and they found no heart. "He's tricked us," said the prince. Then quick, she said, "We must get this back before he returns." So they piled the soil back, And then they tamped it down. And then they lifted the great stone back with a slam. And then quickly she grabbed flowers and she laid them onto the doorstep. And then she grabbed the prince and hid him in the cupboard beneath the sink. And just before she shut the door, he called out, "All living things have a heart. This much I know. Find out where the troll keeps his." And the door was slammed just in time, because the ground began to shake once more. The walls began to quiver and quake, and the whole mountainside rumbled as the troll came lumbering up the hillside, whining like a wolf, panting like a bear, slabbering and slobbering like a great fat toad.
Jag vacklar under dödens
back, flowers fade around me, and brightness dims, and love is lost. My aching eyes sees only black. Up the stairs he came, and with his huge, fat, hairy nose, shoved open the door.
Fårkött är gott. Nötkött är bättre. Men människokött med IKEA-köttbullar och lingonsås på tallriket, det är vad jag gillar bäst.
Mutton is good. Beef is better. And I am rather partial to a plate of meatballs from IKEA with lingonberry sauce. But human flesh is what I love best. Little girl, is there a human in here? Because I can smell him, you know. A human in here? No, she said. Oh, a magpie dropped the bone down a chimney. Perhaps that's what you smell. Then you must feed me, because I am hungry. And he sat, and she brought the barrel of meat, and he picked it up, and he ate, and he ate, and he drank and drank the fat until it ran from his cheek now. Soothe my head, because my brow is aching. And with a thud, his head hit the table. And she climbed up beside him. She ran her fingers through his long, thick, greasy hair. But from where the troll's head lay, he could see flowers. Little girl, why the flowers on my doorstep? She said, because that's where you said your heart is. And it's a special place. I'm going to lay them there every day. Who's ever heard of anyone keeping their heart beneath the doorstep? Well, where do you keep it? Why do you want to know? Well, because wherever it is a special place. I'm going to lay flowers there every day. Well, all right, I'll tell you. I keep my heart hidden in a box, hidden beneath these floors, hidden in the cellar, in the great corridors of stone, in the vaults beneath this cellar, beneath this floor. And that's where I keep it, where no one will find it and no one will hurt it. Now, sing and dance for me till I fall asleep. And the girl sang like a bird and danced like a flame until the troll fell fast asleep. Oh, I, boof. Oh, I, boof. Oh, I, boof, boof. Oh, I, boof. The next morning when the troll was gone, she ran to the cupboard. She opened the cupboard. She told the prince everything. He said, quick, we have not a moment to lose. And they ran to the cellar door and they shoved it open. And then down the spiral stairs they went, down and down into the darkness, into the swallowing black. Down they went until they found themselves amongst the corridors of stone. And they searched this way and that way through the seething shadows where things twitched and scuttled and oozed about their feet. They searched and searched long and hard, the length and the breadth of the day, but they found no box and they found no heart. He's tricked us. Quick, she said. Then we must find our way back. And this way and that way. They wandered and wandered till they came to the stairs. Back up the stairs they went. They shoved the door closed. She lay flowers at the bottom of the cellar. She grabbed the prince and then she hid him in the cupboard. And just before she shut the door, all living things have a heart. This much I know. And then she slammed it closed. And the ground began to shake. And the walls began to quiver and quake once more. The whole mountainside rumbled and shook as the troll came lumbering up the hillside.
Jag vacklar under
Whining like a wolf he came, panting like a bear, slavering and slobbering like a great fat wet toad. Up the stairs, and with his huge great hairy nose shoved open the door.
Fårkött är gott. Nötkött är bättre. Men människokött med falukorv och kanske lite tomatketchup på sidan och makaroner som är tillverkade av häst. Jag tycker om häst, det är jättebra. Så jag kan sitta ner på soffan och titta på Wallander på tvn. Det är vad jag gillar bäst.
Mutton is good. Beef is better. I do rather like macaroni with some tomato sauce in a bowl, sitting on a sofa watching an episode of Wallander. But human flesh is what I love best. Little girl, is there a human in here? 'Cause I can smell him. A human in here? No, she said. A magpie dropped a bone down a chimney. Perhaps that's what you smell. Then you must feed me, 'cause I'm hungry. And he sat, and he ate, and he drank. And now you must soothe my head, because my brow is aching. And he lay his head on the table with a thud. She climbed up beside him. She stroked his hair, his long, greasy hair. But from where his head lay, he could see flowers at the bottom of the cellar door. Little girl, why the flowers, horrible, smelly flowers, where I can see them? Well, because you said that's where your heart is, and I'm going to lay flowers there every day. Who's ever heard of anyone keeping their heart in the cellar? You're pretty, but you're stupid. Well, where do you keep it? Why do you want to know? Well, because whichever direction it is, I'm going to bow to it every day. Well, if you promise not to tell anyone, I'll tell you. Do you promise? Oh, yes, she said. I promise. Well, let me tell you. Far to the north, there are mountains. Amongst the mountains, there is a lake. In the middle of the lake, there is an island. On the island's a church. In the church, there is a well. Swimming on the surface of that well, there is a duck, and in the duck, there is an egg, and inside the egg is where I keep my heart, where no one will ever find it. The world will never hurt it. Now, sing a dance for me till I fall asleep. And the girl, she sang like a bird and danced like a flame. Oh, I, boof. Oh, I, boof. Oh, I, boof, boof. Oh, I, boof. The next morning when the troll was gone, she went to the cupboard, she took out the prince, and she told him every word the troll had said. Then he said, then I will ride my horse and I will go to the north. I will find this island. I will find this duck and I will kill the troll and I will set you free. And he ran then from the castle. He ran down the stone stairs. He ran down the field to the spring where he thought his horse was waiting. He ran and ran, and when he came to the edge of the spring, there he found his horse on the ground, a carcass. The meat chewed, the bones broken, the marrow sucked from the middle, and he wept for his horse. How will I find my way to the north? How will I find my way to these mountains and to the lake now? How will I set the girl free? And then suddenly he remembered a promise once spoken. The wolf said he would come. And so he cupped his hands to his lips and he called out, "Wolf, wolf, are you there? I need your help more than ever now." And no sooner had he spoken those words, at the bottom of the mountainside he saw a shape, a grey shape, loping and zigzagging this way and that way, leaping from boulder to boulder to boulder. Up the hillside came the wolf and stood before him, bright-eyed. "Yes, my master, how may I help you? How may I serve?" And the prince said, "I seek mountains to the north where there's a lake and an island and a church. Do you know it?" And the wolf said, "I know it well. Climb on my back and I will take you there." And so the prince swung his leg over the back of the wolf, and he sank his fingers into the soft grey pelt, and the wolf turned and ran. From mountaintop to mountaintop went the wolf. From snowy peak to snowy peak, far to the north they went, running and running with the prince on his back, until they came to the peak and looked down beneath them, and there was the cold lake with the island in the middle. Down the scree ran the wolf until they came to the edge of the lapping waters, and the prince said, "Stop, how will we cross? I myself cannot swim." The wolf said, "Hold on tight, master," and sprang forward into the waves. And the wolf carried the prince all the way across the cold lake till he came to the island. And the prince jumped from the wolf's back and ran to the door, grabbed hold of the doors of the church and shook and shook and shook. But there was a great iron lock. The doors were sealed and there was no key. And way up on the top of the spire, when the prince stepped back, he could see at the top of the golden spire there was an iron key hanging. Well, how will I open the door now? How will I kill the troll, and how will I set the girl free? When suddenly he remembered a promise once spoken. The raven said he would come. And so he put his hands to his lips and he called out, "Raven, raven, are you there? I need your help more than ever now." And no sooner had he spoken those words, he saw high up in the great blue shield sky of the morning a little speck, and it grew closer and closer, wheeling in the sky, and there was the raven. And the raven called down, "Yes, master, how may I help you? How may I serve?" "There's an iron key hanging from the spire. Drop it for me." So the raven unhooked the key, and down it fell into the prince's hand and said, "Thank you, you've repaid your debt and you're free to go." And with that, he slipped the iron key into the padlock, loosed it, threw open the doors, ran into the church, and sure enough, there was a well. And when he peered over the edge of the well, down at the very, very bottom, on a little disc of light, he could see there was a duck swimming. Well, there was no rope, and there was no bucket, and so there was no choice. He climbed over the edge of the well, and with his back pressed against one side, carefully he lowered himself down, inch by cold inch, down and down and down, deeper and deeper and deeper into the well, until he came to the surface, and he grabbed the duck under his arm, and then he started to climb, and then he climbed up, and then he climbed higher, higher and higher, up towards the daylight. And as he climbed, suddenly his foot slipped, and the bird broke from his grasp, and the egg fell from the bird. Down it fell, struck the water, and sank to the very bottom of the well. Oh, how am I going to kill the troll now? He thought. And how will I set the girl free? When just then he remembered a promise once spoken. The otter, he said he would come. So he cupped his hands to his lips and he called out, "Otter, otter, are you there? I need your help more than ever." And no sooner had he spoken those words, beneath the gleaming surface, he saw a shape, a sleek brown shape, and the otter popped its head from the water. "How may I help you, master? How may I serve?" "There's an egg beneath you, at the bottom of the well. Fetch it for me." And with a flash, the otter went down and down and down and down and down. It swam to the bottom and seized the egg with its claws and swam back up through the water. And the prince took the egg from the otter. "You've repaid your debt and you're free to go." And with that, he started to climb. And he climbed up. Higher and higher and higher went the prince. Up higher and higher. And then he climbed over the wall of the well. And then he ran out through the great doors and out into the shining sun. Well, what do I do now? The wolf said, squeeze it, and squeeze it hard. And so the prince squeezed the egg between his hands. He squeezed it with all of his might. He squeezed so hard that the eggshell began to creak and groan beneath his palm. And then he saw the troll. The troll striding down the hillside, wading through the cold water, clutching his hollow chest. Boy, give me back my heart. You have no business with it. And the prince said, and you have no business keeping a bird in a cage. The girl, the girl, the only one I trusted, and she betrayed me. Give me back my heart, boy, or I will crush the life from you. And the prince said, you are mistaken. It is I that will crush you. And the boy squeezed so hard on the egg that the shell splintered and shattered, and the heart popped. And with a great groan and a stagger, the troll toppled and fell down dead. And the prince suddenly felt something in his hand. And he looked, and suddenly out of the shattered pieces of the shell, a little bird flew up into the air. A tiny little bird. And as it flew up, it started to sing. A beautiful, timid little song. But as it sang, it seemed that a brightness came to the world then. And the higher it flew, the stronger it sang. And around the body of the troll, grass grew thick and fast. And welling up in the hollows of his eyes, water, wells sprang up, and waters rushed from a deep source, pure water from a deep source. And the flowers and the grass grew about him until it was no longer the body of a troll, but a hill beside a church on an island in a lake amongst the mountains to the north. And as the birds sang, the boy climbed on the back of the wolf. And the wolf carried the prince all the way across the water, up the mountainside, from mountain peak to mountain peak, snowy cap to snowy cap, until at last they came to the troll's castle. And the prince ran inside, ran to the kitchen, opened the cupboard door, and there in the shadows she sat, and she said, "Is he dead?" And the prince said, "He is." And he took the chain from about his neck, slipped off the iron ring, and put it on her finger then, and said, "And now you are free." But tell me, now you're free, where will you go? And what will you do? And she said, "Wherever I go, and whatever I do, it will only be with you." And the two of them then walked out of the castle, down the stone stairs, left behind the shadowed halls. Down through the grass they walked till they came to the spring, where the linden tree grew with lush green leaves. And the girl, she came to the water, and she stepped into the spring until she felt the water running around her feet, running free at last. And then she started to laugh. And she laughed, and then she started to dance. She danced round and round, kicking up the water, spraying it through the air like jewels in the early morning sun. And then she crossed that spring to the other side, further than she'd been for many, many a year. And the prince and the girl climbed on the back of the wolf, sank their fingers into the soft grey fur, and the wolf carried them all the way home. And whether the way was long or the way was short, I do not know. But I can tell you when they got back to the palace, the bells began to ring, because then there was a wedding. And what a wedding it was! I wish you could have all been there. There was the finest food and the sweetest wine to drink. And they sang and danced and danced and sang, and everyone was there. The wolf was there, loping around on his hind legs like a loon. The otter was there, weaving his way through the guests, this way and that way, up onto the tables and under the tables and over the benches and under them. And even the raven flew down from the rafters to strut across the floor. And we were there. And we sang songs and we played music. And they paid us an absolute pittance. They fed us on old bits of shoe leather and gave us pints of pond water to drink. But it was worth it, just to hear the story. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.